everybody. Thank you for coming out in this cold weather. I will read our League of Women Voters statement. The League of Women Voters of Nebraska is a nonpartisan, grassroots civic organization that encourages informed and active participation in government, works to increase understanding of major public policy issues, and influences public policy through education and advocacy. Help me.
Advocacy.
Yeah, you know that word. The League does not endorse individual political candidates or political parties. Membership in the League is open to people 16 years and older of all gender identities. And today I'm excited to welcome Marty Stange back. I think he's been here before with us. I'm going to read a little introduction. He gave me two. One was like 2 pages long, and then this one. I thought I'm going to go with the shorter one, but know that this man is very accomplished in many, many things. So, Marty Stange is a professional engineer and currently is the environmental director for the City of Hastings. He has been employed with the city and Hastings utilities for 35 years. His work and passion include providing environmental compliance while developing sustainable operations of the city departments. Today, he will be speaking on the issue of public health and water quality issues as it relates to our nitrate legacy. Welcome, Marty.
Well, thank you. And if you don't mind, I'm just going to stand. It's a little easier that way. And yes, it was some time ago that I spoke, and if I recall right, I talked about water issues. And some of you may have heard some of this, but I wanted to kind of bring that up to kind of where we're at today. So kind of bear with me if you've heard this first part of it a little bit, but I think it'll be good for everybody to at least frame up what we're doing. So yeah, I've titled this The Nitrate Legacy, Sustainability, Public Health, and Future Liability. These are all the things that we're always trying to work on to try to make sure that what we provide is always potable water, but we want to make sure that we're looking out to the future and we don't get caught that we can't provide that. And unfortunately, some of these things are very long-term issues that are there. But I'm at this point now, 35 years means I've been with the system for quite some time. But unfortunately, we're going to be passing some of this stuff on to the next generation. That has happened. In my generation, we picked it up. We've done some work. It is a long-term legacy. Is exactly that. It's going to take some time, but I want to talk about what we're passing on to that next generation for you. All right. So this is a little bit of my disclaimer here. My experience has been, and sometimes when I talk to people, like, oh, there's something wrong with the water and all this, but just know that we're compliant with all of the potable water requirements. We meet the NDE regulations, the EPA regulations, and so this presentation is really to talk about the things that we're trying to keep from happening into the future. We're kind of the front line of that defense that we have of the things that are attacking our water supply system. So, just real briefly here. Is there a way to lower that screen a little bit more? I just noticed that we're cutting off a little bit of that. But anyway, I apologize for that. The Platte River, believe it or not, it's up to the northwest up there. It supplies half of our water. And a lot of people don't realize that it's leaking out of the Platte River. It's flowing towards Hastings. We've done modeling. Perfect. We've done modeling, we show that. We've got a lot of evidence that understanding is right. And I use 50%. It's kind of a weird number, but it shows about half of it is coming from there. But this is the other side, is where's the other 50% comes from. And basically it comes from rainfall that occurs between Hastings and the Platte River. So that water can infiltrate into the ground. The other half of it, believe it or not, half of that 50% or 25% comes from irrigation return. So what's happening is we're irrigating this land. Some of that water gets evaporated, some of it goes in the plant, but unfortunately some of it, because of over irrigation, is flowing back through the root zone back into the aquifer. So what does all this mean? 50% of our water that we consume today and into the future comes through the root zone in all of the ground between Hastings and the Platte River. Okay, so just kind of rounded those out. So we do know that the increased use of center pivots is decreasing the amount of water that's being pumped, but we also understand too that there's, we're trying to do a better job of reducing the amount of water loss that's in there, but center pivots do evaporate a lot of water. So we know that that can be changing, but to say here, a certain amount of water that's always recharging our aquifer is coming through that root zone. So whatever farming practices occur, we're being impacted by that.
Tell us what the root zone is.
Oh, the root zone. Yeah, let me state this, and I thank you because I use terms that I'm familiar with. Okay, so when we talk about the soil profile that we have out here, the root zone is really the top 3 feet. It's where the roots live. Okay, so corn, I'll go down there. Wild or native grasses like blue stem, some of them can go 15 feet down, but it's that upper area where it's at. We typically think 3 to 5 feet is kind of the root zone. The vadose zone is the area that's between the root zone and the top of the aquifer. So it's just the area that's drier, but there's still water leaking down through that. And then the aquifer, of course, is where the water table's at. Okay, very good question. So this map, though a little bit old, it's still very applicable. I know it's a little hard to see, and maybe my cursor, I can get it right here. This is generally where the city of Hastings at. I guess you can't quite see it, but it's in kind of the lower right-hand corner there. But all that really reddish area, even the orange areas in there, these are all areas that we identified to have high nitrates that are out there. And you look at it and you say, well, there's the Platte River, it's flowing in here. I will tell you this, the Platte River water is not very high in nitrates because biology, the stuff that's growing in the water, does a really good job of removing it. But that's real sandy soil on there. That's really from fertilizer that's being applied to those areas. I mean, in some cases, they're applying fertilizer, say 6 inches into the ground. They're knifing it in. That groundwater might only be 3 or 4 feet down below that. So they're very close to it. That's why you see such a high amount. If you looked on the other side of the river, same thing is going on in that Central Platte area. We know that. But all that water still coming towards the city of Hastings as water flows from the northwest to the southeast.
Could I ask the question?
Yes.
That's about 14 years old. If we looked at a map current, how would it be different?
We are still seeing those same numbers out there. We are seeing some slight changes that are going in there. And we haven't done a full study, but my assistant, Jenny Sidlow, we do about 20% of those wells that are in that area each year. And so we're kind of tracking that. But these things are really slow. I mean, 5-10 years, I'm not going to see a lot, but I can tell you that I'm starting to see in around the kind of north of Juniata towards Hastings, we're starting to see some change that's occurring in that area.
Better or worse?
In some areas it's a little bit better, and in some areas it's gotten worse. So it's slow. So I wish I could stick around long enough to go do another one, but to go grab, and I'll show you here in a little bit, we had to grab 1,000 samples. I don't get a lot of volunteers to go out and help me do this in the evenings, but we are monitoring that right now. But that was a big effort that we went through. So. But very good question to ask, and I wish I had some additional data. But based upon what we even have through 2015 through 1990s, we've seen that there was a 68% increase in nitrates that are out there. Part of the reason that we're seeing that little increased trend in there is because we have changed the way our water is being withdrawn from the aquifer. We're pulling it from one area more than we are another area. So we have we're doing modeling right now. We just did another upgrade on our modeling to see exactly what that impact is, but we purposely are trying to pull water from where there's areas that are clean, and by doing that, we're changing where those plumes are at. And so we're affecting it positively for the city of Hastings, but that still isn't changing what's out there. At that time, what we learned was that our nitrate levels in some areas out there were 7.5 times the MCL of 10 parts per million. And unbeknownst to us, we started looking at uranium because we noticed that gross alpha was going up. And we found areas out there that were 10 times the MCL for uranium, which is at 30 parts per billion. So it's 1,000 times less than what's nitrates, but those are the limits we have. And as I stated, we collected over 1,000 water samples out there. That takes some time, takes effort. We're trying to coordinate more with the NRDs, with UNL, Conservation Service, and we're trying to collect more and more of that data. The NRDs are starting to coordinate a little bit more, and we'll hopefully maybe get into some areas and just really get a lot of water sampling, and there's more people can get out there and doing it. But obviously, we got more farmers that are saying, I don't want my water tested because they didn't like the results. Now, that's another issue I got to deal with. So, water supply loss, what does that mean to us? So in the city of Hastings where we have these wells, if a well gets close or goes over the 10 parts per million, we just have to shut it down. We don't have a treatment system that we can change that. Today we've lost 8 wells. A well today costs around $600,000 per well. We've lost $4.8 million worth of capital assets in our system. We have replaced and recovered some of those, but we've had to spend several $1 million to make that happen. So that's a real loss to our system. So the ratepayer has to pick this cost up.
So if you've taken out 8, how many are left? How many wells do we have?
We have roughly 25 operating wells. Engineers are not very good. We build one and then we just the next number. We've got number 36 in the system, but some we've actually physically taken out of there, so we're left with 25. So the one at yeah, go ahead.
Can they ever return? Are they out of service because they were too high or not? Or
Some of them were, yeah. Some of them have been taken. Those 8 that we have, some of them are out of service. We are looking really hard at trying to bring them back. We have brought some of those back, but we've had to spend millions of dollars to get them back in there. So for example, the well at the airport entrance has had high nitrates, still at high nitrates. But we have a method right now that we're able to pull clean water into it. Why I said that if some of the areas that's clean, we're managing our aquifer. We really believe we're going to get that one back. Well 26 at the west end of Lake Hastings was high, but this ASR project we've been able to recover that. But we've spent a lot of money on that ASR project. So whenever possible, we're going to try to get the equipment back in there, but it's going to take monies to get that back in there. So.
Did you say what ASR is?
Yeah, aquifer storage and restoration.
Oh, okay.
And I'll get to that here in just a minute, so I've kind of jumped ahead there. But anyway, I want to talk about the Vado zone. I'm glad you asked a question about what that is. It's that zone in there. We've done work with UNL. We've done a couple of scans of this. We have it on the table to have UNL help us in the future. The NRDs are looking at this, but we just don't do this every year. But in 2010, we did a Vado zone sampling, went out to let's see, I think we had 25 locations that are out there. We wanted to find out where the nitrates were as it went from the root zone down into the aquifer through that. We found that we had anywhere between 500 to 2,000 pounds of fertilizer or nitrogen in that area, in that zone, that's pounds per acre that's out there. There was questions about, well, is this naturally occurring? What it is, but we did isotope sampling. We actually can tell where the nitrogen comes from, and it's pretty much anhydrous ammonia. So we included 23 of those sites. We did another sampling in 2016 to kind of confirm that. In 5 years' time, the average nitrate that was under that cropland, so we went back to those 23 sites that were out there in 2011 versus 2016. In the rural areas, it had increased by 30%. Okay? But I'm happy to say that that's not everywhere. So 5 sites that we did in urban locations, and they were different. There were some parks or just some urban residential areas, those kinds of things. The same kind of thing, we went back to the same sites, 5 years apart, we actually saw a 44% decrease. And so the question is, why the decrease? A lot of it is because of increased water conservation. About that time, our prices were going up. People were starting to use less water. That means less nitrogen is being pushed back down the aquifer from over irrigation. So we've done a good job of trying to convince everybody they need to have meters on their irrigation wells. We've gotten that done. We think that there's a benefit to that, but really trying to understand wasting of water or excess water also wastes your nitrogen, and it just drives it into the aquifer.
So the nitrates have decreased. Have you seen an increase of uranium in those same areas then?
The answer is
Yes.
yes, because the uranium is not in the city, but just outside the city.
Yeah.
And we are seeing that change taking place. We can't say it's because it's more nitrogen in there, but it's also, we got to factor in the fact that uranium is probably moving with the aquifer. And as we change where our wells are at, we're actually moving that uranium in there. But it's complicated, to say the least. This is the uranium map. The city of Hastings is like right here. I don't know if you can see that. I guess it's not showing up real well there, but it's in the lower right-hand quadrant. There's kind of a line through there. You can see that. That's the Union Pacific Railroad. So it's just north of the Union Pacific Railroad. And what we're seeing from 2011 to 2015 is that is starting to slip more to the east. That's in there. But there's just that zone that's occurring. So why the uranium? Why it became a really big issue for us. We noticed that our gross alpha values were going up, and that's why we started looking at uranium to see what source of radioactive compounds might be out there, the elements that might be out there. And what we found is that uranium is naturally occurring in our rocks and our soil. It is part of the formation that we have. Platte River's known about it for a long time. It's not surprising that we have it, but everybody I talked to said, Hastings area doesn't occur because it's not mobile. We know it's in your rock, but it doesn't show up. But all of a sudden it was showing up. And talking with the health department, it's starting to show up in a lot of other areas that are out there. And they kind of wanted to know what it is. So we started looking at maybe some causes. I was able to convince the Board of Public Works to spend some money, work with the University of Nebraska. It is some special drilling. I found that there was a group at the university that was working on this issue, and they had done work at Alda. They moved to Hastings, and what we found is this. Nitrates are causing the problem. They are feeding the bacteria that naturally occurs in soil. Water's not sterile. There's life in it, okay? And there's bacteria that sits in all the grains of sand and gravel that's down there, but when we feed it nitrogen, they're just more prolific. They're happy. They have their smorgasbord, and they're going to do what bacteria does. And what we're finding is there's bacteria, certain kinds of them, are now taking uranium off of the rock, and they use it as a food source. Once we figured that out, that kind of explained why it's going up. So now we start talking about public health issues, because now all of a sudden I've got nitrogen and I've got uranium. How do we do this? This has become more of an issue. I've been dealing with this for some time here, and this is just a headline that Flatwater put out, but is it getting worse? My point is, I can't say it's getting worse because we don't have a historical data, but what I can say is we're becoming more aware of it. It's out there. We didn't know this at this time. When we started sampling this, we always gave the results to all of the rural domestic wells, irrigation wells. Anybody that we sampled from always got our results. A lot of them said, I just didn't realize that we had a problem. So is it getting worse? It may be that it's just getting more aware of what's going on. Okay. So why is nitrates an issue? Just a reminder, it causes blue baby syndrome. Basically, it restricts the ability of the baby's blood to carry oxygen, and if not treated, they can die. That's an acute issue. Now we understand it's also occurring in adults who have respiratory issues and so forth. We used to think it was just a baby issue, but it's anybody that has oxygen, inability to carry enough oxygen in their blood. So being more aware of that. Nitrate is starting to be studied more and more. We're starting to see possible links between cancer and birth defects with nitrates that are out there. This is a study out of Minnesota. I can say that the University of Nebraska Medical Center is doing a lot of work in this area, so be proud of what they're doing here. I worked with Martha Rhodes on some of this work earlier. I think this really kind of puts it into perspective. She was looking at how nitrates and these other agricultural chemicals might be combined together, and I apologize, you might not quite see that, but the national average for birth defects for 10,000 live birth is about 303. And that really purple area, and hopefully you can see where Adams County's at. There's Adams County. We're in the deep purple, and we have anywhere from 1,050 to almost 1,500 birth defects per 10,000 live births. So we're easily 3 to 4 times higher in Adams County, and there's a few other counties. Even those other counties are 2 or 3 times higher than the national average. So the question is, why are they so high? And you're going to see these in Iowa. You can see whenever we have these nitrogen areas that are out there. They're still working on it. Finding connections between environmental issues and health is a really tough thing. But they're now making connections to pediatric brain cancer and those things. So what does it mean to the water supply? Obviously, we're trying to keep it out. But it also means that out in that rural area, there was a lot of people drinking water that was high in uranium. They didn't even know it was high. Testing for uranium is expensive. So you might go to Surtech and pay $40 or whatever for a test, but you're not testing for all the pesticides and the chemicals that are out there. But we did it because we needed to, so we provided that information, and I'm proud of getting that done. At least those folks know what they're dealing with. But it's also being pumped as irrigation water, as livestock watering. So the cows, the pigs, or chickens, whatever that's out there, they're drinking water that's higher in uranium. We also know that uranium is picked up by the plants, the corn that's growing, the soybeans that are growing. I've asked questions, where does that go? I had one professor said, well, you don't need to worry about it. All that corn just goes into the feed, and it said all gets mixed up. Not a problem. I said, yeah, but what about the guy who brings a watermelon to Hastings and he sells it? And he just looked at me, I hadn't thought about that. So awareness is a big issue. Obviously, we now know where it's at, and we're trying to manage our use of water to try to avoid that uranium as much as we can.
What is our level? You said it's below the 30.
Yeah, I don't have the exact numbers out there, but I know that, okay, I apologize right up front, this gets a little complicated. The regulation is for those radioactive compounds is the gross alpha, which is the radiation comes off of it. We are running anywhere from 8 to sometimes 12, maybe up to 15 picocuries per liter. This don't mean a lot to you, but understand we're down below that. But EPA comes along and says, all right, if you go over that, you get to subtract out the uranium portion of it, and as long as you don't go over that 30 part per billion of mass, that's not the radiation, because they're measuring 2 different things. Even our own water operators get confused by this. You can take that out. What we know is our uranium is the major component of whatever radiation's in that water. So whenever we take that out, then we're in compliance, because our mass part of it, we're usually in the 10 or 12 parts per billion of mass. So they allow us to take that. It's a really complicated and weird thing, but you throw in strontium and thallium and some of these other chemicals that are in there, and they all have different impacts. But we saw it because we saw that gross alpha going up, and then that made us look a little deeper into this. So sorry about a complex answer, but I even get water operators every now and then coming and says, now tell me again, how's that work?
So I'll come back and ask you, so are we close to it, or are we away from?
We are doing a pretty good job of keeping it out, and when you say close, I'd have to ask, you know, we are close to that 15 part on the gross alpha, but because of the ability to take that value of the uranium out of there, I'd say we're okay, because that is just the indicator that's there. What's really complicating our operation is that when we treat our water, we're actually concentrating that uranium, and now it's becoming an issue of how do we get rid of it, okay? So right now what was happening, believe it or not, the uranium was in the water, been there for a long time, it's just, you know, slowly been creeping up. It was going through the human gut, and we pass it on out to wastewater treatment and do that. And today what we're doing is we're treating it, trying to keep it out of the aquifer so we don't pass it through the human gut. But unfortunately some of that's still going out to the wastewater treatment plant because that's really the only place we can go with it. So we're avoiding uranium treatment. Grand Island treats for uranium. We're trying to avoid it as long as we can. It's about another $20 million if we have to. And then we have to deal with shipping off that uranium into the future. So right now, we have not increased the uranium that's at the wastewater treatment plant. It's kind of a balance. So we're kind of fortunate on that. We'll just use it as long as we can, because I'm a guy. If I can kick the can down the road and save some money, I'm going to do that as long as I can. So, but anyway, why is
It's a dangerous position to me, because when I get my water safety
Yeah.
from
Yeah.
the department, we're always at the very top of where we can be. And to me, that seems statistically impossible for every one of those to be right at the top, not one little bit below, not one little bit above, but right there.
Yeah, we're trying our best to not over spend. We're trying to keep them as close as we can. And so when we're real at the top, so I'm going to use nitrates, it's an easy number because 10. So we say, yeah, we're at 9.8. Now on that well, we're not going to run it very much, but because I need that well during fire flow events and so forth. So I don't want to get rid of that infrastructure. That's important, but at the same time, I got to make sure I'm below 10. If I'm below 10, I'm good. We have a lot of wells that are at 5 and 7. We're going to use those around the clock as much as we can, but what you see in that report is what is our highest. It was there. So we're managing that as much as we can to avoid having to build more capital improvements, but yet our number one goal is to keep it safe. So I understand the confusion, and it's really tough to try to explain that.
I just think those capital improvements, when these things are causing that many birth defects in our kids and stuff, is probably worth it. And if everybody has to pay even more for their water, then so be it.
Yeah. Now, keep in mind those birth defects, that includes all the people that are out there. You know, and they just lump the whole Adams County in. They do have records of where they're occurring, and they're not going to share that with me because that, you know, they want to always be able to get that data that's out there. What I'm hopeful is that if you look at it, because we are monitoring that, we're doing a better job of protecting the public because the consumer out there had no idea they're doing it. So this slide right there kind of gets to the point I want to make, is that why is uranium an issue? Well, it mimics calcium in our body. So as we drink it, I like calcium in my drinking water, by the way, that's always a good thing. But it can cause cancer in your liver, kidney, bone disease, but it can also be picked up by the fetus. Here's the problem we've got. In the realm of understanding health risks due to environmental issues, sometimes 1 + 1 = 3. So the question I'm asking UNMC and the people that are working on it, and they agree with me, is that all of a sudden we have nitrates that we know is an issue, but then we add uranium to it. Those each have a MCL, maximum contaminant level. But what's the maximum contaminant level if we have both of them? So just what you say, they're air. They don't know that. They're working on that. We've got smart people trying to figure that out. Is uranium contributing to the problem, but it's because we've got high nitrates and that as well. We don't know that. We don't know that combination that's out there. It's going to take some time. Yeah.
The one comment says uranium mimics calcium. How far does that go? Does that show up on a bone density test?
I'm not a physician. I don't know. All I know is that's how the body perceives it. And what's ironic is that when you look at plants and they uptake uranium, it's displacing the calcium that's on that root, and it follows that same path. So uranium is following the calcium. In fact, what's ironic, and I think I took that slide out, is that when you look at the uranium and impacting crops, when you do that, it impacts the ability of the crop to take up moisture. And so what does the farmer do? He says, oh, it's stressing, so I put more water on. Well, he pumps more water out of the ground, trying to feed it. He over irrigates because it's dry. It goes down, takes the nitrogen with it. But oh, by the way, during that process, he's evaporated a bunch of it. So what happens when you evaporate? The metals build up. So now all of a sudden we're putting more and more uranium out in that field on that ground, and then because it's going to recharge, we have this system where it just keeps turning over. We keep driving down more and more. I don't know where it's going to end, but we need to figure out how to manage that. And one of my goals is you got to manage the water use as well. It's not just the fertilizer; it's also the water use. Can we cut down it so we don't have that feedback as much as possible? If we can cut down the amount of water that's being pumped, more water comes from the Platte River. That helps us out. So it's complicated.
So do you see high nitrate and high uranium in the same well?
Not exactly.
Yeah.
And so let me explain. Very good questions. So I always get good questions from you guys. Okay, so
Can you repeat the question?
okay, so you want to know if nitrogen and uranium appear in the same, high in the same well. The answer is not exactly. So let me explain this. So to get the uranium to be mobilized, the nitrates need, or the bacteria need a certain amount of alkalinity, which is just calcium that's in there, but they also have to be associated with an area that has some iron in it. Okay, so let me explain a little bit about iron. Okay, a water that has iron in it, which is north of Lockland, you know it's got iron in it because the pivots stain red. That water is considered anoxic, meaning low in oxygen. And it's also low in nitrates. In fact, I mentioned that to one of the grad students at UNL. She got her PhD because they went out and they could spot on Google center pivots that were red. They went out, tested them, yeah, they're all low in nitrates because it had iron that was in there and it proved it. So, you know, good for her if she gets her PhD. But what we know is when you have that, then you have high iron in there, but you're also getting low nitrates. But there's a zone between that and the water we have, which is high in oxygen, low in iron, but then that low or that high oxygen converts the nitrogen to nitrates, which is what's dangerous. So when you see it, what you'll see is there's a zone of high uranium that's in there, and then over here is the nitrates, and right over here is the iron, and it's just all right there. And when we started looking at this, UNL says, wow, you're a great candidate. We need to drill right here. And I remember they had this test tube. The thing blew off because they did some reaction. They're all jumping for joy. And they go, we found it. And they had the idea. They knew it was there. And we've been able to prove that takes place. So sorry for being kind of long-winded, but you know, most people won't listen to what I have to say. That's exciting stuff. You know? Yeah. So sorry to kind of get through all that, but I wanted to show that we have public health, we got human health that's out there, but really what I want to get to is we need to start thinking about soil health. Our soils, if they're healthy, then our water's healthy, we're healthy. There's a connection between all those things. And one of the things that we're working on right now is we're trying to work with the Nebraska Soil Health Coalition. You can hear a lot more about this. We're trying to get some farmers to come in. We're doing education. We're getting monies. They're going to hire a director. They have decided that in the state of Nebraska, the first hub is going to be here in Hastings. They want to hit South Central. So about a 9-county area that they have. They're going to go to some other areas in the state, but they think that right down here. So, of course, soil health means a lot of things to different people, but obviously we want to try to encourage things like water conservation, best management practices of nitrogen, how we might be able to improve our resiliency of our soil, how can we retain as much rainfall versus depending totally on irrigation, those kinds of things. So it's a kind of a holistic thing that we're doing, but we need to work on it. But it's going to take time because it takes a while for that water to leach down through there. But you know, it's like planting trees. If we didn't plant it yesterday, the best time to plant it now, the worst time is to plant it tomorrow. So that's kind of where we're at.
I have a question. It has to do with my dog. I don't mean this to be a loaded question, so it's on it. But when I think about soil health and the history of pesticides, so I work with private farm workers, and that labor has, my labor has really gone down because of pesticide use.
Yeah.
And now we have a labor shortage.
Yep.
And so what, like, how do you see the future of that relationship working, balancing?
Okay. I want to qualify my statement as I'm just a misplaced farm boy that learned how to do engineering. Okay, so I know a little bit about what's going on there. And I was the guy that injected fertilizer in the ground, so I've been there. But what we're really looking at is we think that there are some things out there we can do to really reduce the amount of pesticides that are going on. So I'm going to give you an example. So we all know about the rootworms that are on our corn, and we put the chemicals on there. And of course, was it Mead, Nebraska has this whole problem of what's going on there. Right now, there's some folks saying, you know, we've been doing this. Why do we do it every year? I mean, right now you go out there, there's hardly any rootworms in there. So do we need to do it every year, or do we need to do it every 3 out of 4 years or 2 out of 4 years? Well, what we found out is the people who supply the seed go, well, it costs us a lot more if we don't put it on there. Well, it seems kind of ironic, but they have to separate it and whatever. We've got people right now says, what if we paid the farmer that difference? Could we get them to do that, knowing they don't really need it? But right now they're just kind of held according to the industrial ag thing out there. Says, I got to put it on because it comes with that. So we're looking at those kinds of things. Is can we change the way the industry is? Can we change behavior? Because some people just do it because that's the way they've always done it. Can we do that? Tough when you're my age to get changes, but we can hit the young kids. We can do that. So we're really looking at that kind of stuff. I don't know if that helps, but we are very well aware that there's that kind of stuff going on. We still got to make farming profitable. I mean, that's got to be there. Otherwise, we don't have anything. But what can we do to help stimulate that change that we need to take place? And I got a couple things here I'll show you.
With the major ag lobbying, I just think of the Bayers and all of that compared to, I'm guessing that coalition is very, very small.
Yep.
And it's just
I don't know how much time I got here, but let me say this about the coalition. They came to me and asked me. I had been asking the NDE, the legislative, the NRD folks, or whatever. I says, we need something here in South Central Nebraska. For whatever reason, these guys came to me and said, we want to do something. And what they're a bunch of retired professors. I think their wives told them to get out of the house, but that's just my observation, okay? But they are experts in what they're doing, and they have been doing this. There's other states that have done this. They just want to bring it in Nebraska. And there's a lot of people that are behind this. But one of the persons on here is Tom Hogemeyer. And he's the guy that his family does Hogemeyer seeds. And he will tell me, he says, we missed the boat. We didn't realize this stuff was going on. So he says, we need to do some things with that. What I was really surprised with, I asked him, I said, so all the seed that you have here, can it be adapted to alternative practices? Right now, is your seed is just there, you get the high bushels because you put the nitrogen in it. He says, well, we think if we can find other ways, that's okay. But he says, you ask a really good question. Maybe our genetics is not even adaptable to that. Turns out, I found out there's actually seed companies that are doing that right now. They're saying, we're going to change the genetics so that we don't need that much nitrogen or that commercial. We're going to use other kinds of inorganic or organic nitrogen that's out there. So they're working on it. I think that's just so cool that they're starting to rethink that, so. All right. So here's one of my favorite parts. Get excited about this. So the corn on the left-hand side of the screen was what my granddad was just so tickled. And I can remember sitting in his old Chevy pickup all winter long and clear into summer. He had him sitting on the dashboard. You know, the heater would come on and I had to breathe old corn cobs, you know, that was coming out of there. He was so proud that he had a full ear. It was green. He could tell you, without even looking, how many kernels was on that ear. You know, he was proud of it, you know, but that's what it was. The ear on the right-hand side is what my son-in-law does. And so my question is, which one's more profitable? Assuming that there's no pollination issues. Okay, so which one's more profitable? I'm not expecting an answer, but that's the question. Let me ask.
Cornfield on the left, though, the corn plants weren't as close together.
Well, let me say this. What the corn plant on the right-hand side is telling us, and we've got evidence of this, that they're running out of nitrogen just about the time that the ear is about filled out. So they're not leaving fertilizer in the field. And they see more profit over here because they're not wasting it that was over here. My granddad put a lot of fertilizer in it. Now the genetics is probably a little bit different, but what we know is that if you end up with that ear right there, your rate of return on your investment is higher. Okay? Because you're not leaving as much in the field. And my next slide shows that.
What kind of fertilizer did your granddad put on?
Anhydrous, I mean, we did that. We had a few cows. We would, you know, obviously run the cows that were out there. But at the time, you know, it was all about how many bushels I could get, you know. And granted, the genetics have gotten better and so forth. And I'm not saying that year came from back then, but the point we want to make is thinking about what his thought was, a full ear was a great thing. My son-in-law says, I don't want a full ear. If I've done that, then I've got less money in the bank. Okay? So that's the takeaway here. Okay? So we've really been working with the NRDs. I've selected other NRDs across the. This is the upper Elkhorn NRD. They did a study, looks like from 2003 to 2013, 10-year supply timeline in here. They got information from the farmers that are out there, and they show that 77% of the fields were receiving too much nitrogen. 3/4 of all the farmers out there were putting excess nitrogen on based upon their harvest rates. And it's just like, why? I mean, that's just amazing. Here's another graph. This is one I really like. So the lower Niobrara NRD, they came in and did a little bit of study. I know there's a lot of questions about UNL recommendations and so forth. But right there where it says a -50 to 0, that's 0's the UNL recommendation. So everything to the left side of that is somebody had put on less nitrogen, and they saw about 9 bushels per acre less by saving anywhere from 50 to 75 pounds of nitrogen per acre. The real story here is people who put on 50 pounds, or say 25 to, gosh, what's the average of that? Almost 100 pounds over there. They only saw a bushel difference in income or yield. But once they got past that UNL, all of that was wasted nitrogen. Yeah, the ears are full, but they lost, I mean, they put money in and didn't get much for it. So, working with some folks, and I've shared this around, and we can argue about the numbers, but it's just a point here is that if you put on ammonia, and you're only getting this much for corn, if you put on an average of 25 pounds of excess nitrogen, you roughly have lost $11.50 per acre profit. If you do that 121.5, with some of them are newer, they were losing 69.5 or 66.95 dollars per acre, and then that's would change with the prices went. But my question is this: what's the incentive for putting excess ammonia on? I still have guys today will say, I will put 10% on more than what UNL says because I want to make sure I got it there. For what reason?
Right.
Well, we're showing that it doesn't need to be there. In fact, if they would do a better job of not over irrigating, they'll keep a lot of that nitrogen in that root zone. That's the key. So you got to have a holistic approach to that. I've showed this, and everybody just kind of looks at me like, what? I showed it to my son-in-law. I'm proud of my son-in-law for doing it. He goes, that's exactly why we do not fill out that year. Because we don't want to get into that loss that's there. Because we might be a little short on yield, but the cost is way higher on that other side. Does that make sense to everybody? Yeah.
But
So
not everybody follows that practice.
that's right. And not everybody follows drought irrigation either, so that's a whole other issue. I found this really cool. I don't know if anybody knows that USDA has been doing a lot of work in this area for 30 years. I just thought this was so cool. So, I'm sorry that the slide isn't right there, but the ears on the left-hand side is from a field they plant every year, same genetics, same density of seeds per acre out there, with no fertilizer. So what it tells you is, it does not matter how much fertilizer you have, that corn plant will do everything it can to reproduce. That's really kind of a cool idea. So they come in and they say, well, what is corn soybean rotation? Absolutely no fertilizer added, none. Just having soybeans out there every other year gives them that much more. This one on the right-hand side is they plant corn every 4th year. They have a soybean, they have a milo, and then they do like an alfalfa or clover type thing. What they're saying is, yeah, you can do those other things. They're bringing nitrogen in at no cost. Oh, well, there's a cost, but they're bringing it in that ear can survive, but it doesn't have to be a commercial fertilizer. That corn soybean one is really a great thing. I mean, it's telling people that crop rotation is a great way of reducing the amount of nitrogen that you might need.
Marty, about 10 minutes.
Okay, I will just finish this up. So what can be done? Cover crops, crop rotation, minimum tillage. We have a lot of people say they do minimum tillage, they really don't. Use of animal grazing, there's getting to be a few more of that. We see a lot of these farms are just plowed up already. We need to figure out how to store the snow instead of letting it blow off. We need to improve the carbon content of the soil, because the more carbon you have, the more nitrogen that we can. There's lots of evolving things. But irrigation is the motive force in which takes the nitrogen from the root zone down the aquifer. We've got to always pair water conservation with best management practice. The question that always comes up is, why is there resistance to implementation of best management practice? And I asked a really simple question one day. I do these talks in front of farmers that go to the nitrogen training. I said, I see center pivots out there. When I was a kid, irrigation, we set tubes. Yeah, the rows went downhill. So we put a center pivot up, and guess what? Every one of those farmers are still running that rows downhill. Why is that? My granddad said, always farm on the contour. Why aren't you changing those road directions 90 degrees so that as the rain comes and as the water runs off from the center pivot, that you're catching it along there? I have a lot of guys say, I never gave that a thought. I says, you could simply change your road direction and save water instead of running it out. I got a farmer around here I've been watching. He changed it where he used to have a water hole went away. Simple as that. Now he has an acre or so more that he used to just farm through because it's not worth his time to pick it up. At least now he's growing something. Otherwise it was just dead. So it's little things like that we need. It took a lot of little decisions to get where we're at. It's going to take a lot of little decisions to make it better. So I'm going to quickly go through this. So cover crops. I've got people say, oh, I can't afford it. It's too expensive. And I go, really? We're Nebraskans. We can come up with a way to make this happen. Have you ever considered another way of putting that cover crop in? Pardon me, but I'm going to use my son-in-law because they live in northern Kansas and they don't have irrigation. So everything they do is all about saving water. I think that's a great thing. They planted 30-inch rows. They went up to Nebraska where they could buy a lot of old planters. They bought the planter units. They go to 15-inch rows. They found a place that they would cut planter plates for him. They use a little laser. Just the guy does this for his home business there. So they could plant a cover crop. They don't use a drill. 30-inch rows. They plant on 15-inch rows. That's a cover crop. That's a mixed seed. I hear all these comments that you can't get that good mix in there. You know, some seeds will come out early, some don't. He has a really good in there because he's using a planter. So they are using their planter twice a year, the spring, fall. They got 3 of them there, but they have everything planted with cover crop the day after they're done with that field, because one of them's just planting cover crop. So the idea is, well, if you wait till you're all done with harvest, that's a problem. I mean, we need to work that out. Not every farmer can do that. But in their case, they're planting right behind it, and they're just using a planter. They didn't invest in that expensive drill. And they're in wheat country, you know? So the question I have for you folks is, so if we implement these kinds of things, who pays for it? And that's what it always comes down to. It's really dollars. Unfortunately, we're going to be sending this on to the next generation. I at least feel like I have. You haven't noticed I'm getting close to retirement, but at least I know that we've identified it. We're trying to figure out where it's coming from. There's still a lot that we need to learn. But unfortunately, we're going to be leaving this to our children. That's the sad thing in all of this. I'm hoping we're doing better with more education, more testing. At least we're trying to get people information so they're not drinking contaminated water to the best of our ability. And it's not just us, it's around. And I was just going to say about the uranium. I have friends in other NRDs. They haven't come out publicly yet, but I will tell you, they're all saying, "Oh, we're starting to see the same thing." So it's coming, but you know, there's a lot of resistance. We don't want to tell people we got bad water. So I asked this question: who pays for safe drinking water? Should the polluter pay? Right now we got gas station leaks fuel. They got to clean it up. The landfill leaks, the city's got to clean it up. Right now we don't have that when it comes to nitrogen contamination, especially when they know that they're putting 10% excess on it. Not sure that the polluter has to pay. It's certainly going to impact profits. There's a bigger picture that's there, but you know, should the NRDs pay? Was their job to protect it? They didn't. They let it get away. Should the city pay? You know, right now we are picking that tab up, but we're not treating the water for everybody. There's still people out there in the rural areas that are going to have to do it on their own. So does the person getting the water, should they pay? You know, it was great when we didn't have to do that, but right now we've spent $15 million in just the treatment now, with potentially another $20 million if we have to do uranium. I asked the question: should the federal government pay? They're the ones that want a cheap food policy, and then some of you in the room here will remember. I remember my granddad saying, "We got a cheap food policy so we can feed the world." Okay, but there was a cost that came to that. You know, we had to increase our yields, and we wanted more fertilizer, we wanted more water, we did all this, and it was great. But that came with a cost. If we ask the federal government to do it, remember, it's your tax dollars that's got to clean this up. Okay? Should countries that benefit from our food production, should they be paying? Should there be a tariff? Should there be something on where we get some of that money back? Because we're not charging them for that environmental cleanup. It's just sitting there. It's just getting worse. Okay? But we have to consider national security issues, right? I remember Granddad says, well, if you feed the country, they won't shoot at you, right? I don't know how true that is, but that was his mindset at the time. Should the consumer who's buying alcohol? We produce so much grain here, it's not even being used for food anymore. If you notice, we don't have as many rail cars going to the Gulf of Mexico to carry corn or soybeans. Right now we're sending alcohol and diesel to California. Okay? So the people that are wanting that energy, should they pay for it? Okay? I mean, I buy alcohol because it's the thing to do, right? But we have tax incentives to keep that. If we increase production, which everybody wants us to do, I ask the question, is that really good? Because if we have a larger surplus, then we have to have more things. That's why the ag energy industries come in, because we had all the surplus, we need to find markets for it. But that's a biofeedback that keeps coming back saying that's causing overproduction, then it reduces car prices, and it's a whole agricultural welfare issue, but it's still our tax dollars when we supplement that loss that's out there. Should the fertilizer companies pay? They're the ones recommending this. This is a problem with the fox in the hen house. They've been telling us, put it on, it's great, we pay for it. Should the food consumer pay? Because obviously we have cheap food prices. I know some people are going to argue with me, but I will tell you that if all of our food was organically grown, it'd be a lot higher. We have an industrial grown food that's cheaper, even though we complain about it. So should the consumer pay for it? Should foreign companies that we sell corn and soybeans to pay that tariff for environment? It should be a combination. So I think it's probably where we need to go with it, but we need to have people talk about that. So the issue here is, I'm just about done, is how do we get the public involved? No one person's going to fix this. It took a lot of decisions. How do we get the message out? It would seem like, so that we don't seem like we're crying wolf. Some people are upset about that. How do I address the issue of the drinking water user versus the agricultural production? We're trying our best to do that. We have, our goal is that drinking water is everyone's responsibility. We're trying to bring everybody together to the table to find solutions to do that. It's not urban versus rural. I know some communities, there's a big divide. We're trying to resolve that. That's why the soil health thing and some of the work we're going to be doing is really trying to do that. How do we find some ways to make it still profitable, but how can we protect the water, do that? I think we need to all be working together. That'll give us a lot better result than drawing divisions in the sand. So it really comes down to, how do you enact social behavior change? So one of the things I'm really proud of is we're starting to think about bringing sociologists into the picture, asking them, how do we get this message across? I'm an engineer, I can talk about water all day, but I don't know the nuances of dad farming and the son wanting to change. I got out of farming because I couldn't get along with dad, and so I know that part of it. But what we do know is that there are more and more people starting to think, yeah, I'm older, I can't handle the risk, but boy, I'd sure like to see my son or daughter do something better. So we need to think, how can we help those younger ones? It's going to take some time, but how can we maybe overcome some of the risks that they're going to deal with, and how do we get it to stick? Giving money to farmers to say plant a cover crop, but if you don't do it for 5 years, it's not going to work. It takes that much time. So many times they'll do it, and then we find out, well, it didn't work, so they move on to something else. We've got to figure out that there's a little longer time frame of getting some of these changes made, and we need to work on it. That's where the sociologist focus comes in. And
Some people that need to get going.
yeah,
So.
this is my last slide. So
Okay.
the problem is, it's been tyranny of small decisions, and it's going to take a lot of small decisions to make this better. Leave it at that.
Thank you. I think you could have talked a couple more hours.
Well, I could, and I can't. And I was going to say, just as a prelude, if you don't find it that I talk, I would mind come back talking about the whole uranium and hydrogen hub thing at another time, because ammonia, which you see right there, I'm not against ammonia. I think ammonia is a great tool. We just need to know how to manage it. But anhydrous ammonia is a flammable material, and right now we're starting to see if we can make ammonia from, say, a nuclear source or wind, solar, whatever. It is a fuel that we can store. We can actually convert our power plants to burn in ammonia. So I'm really excited about that we can maybe take something that we have here and using it in a positive thing to reduce the amount of coal that we're doing. It's going to be an issue of economics on that, but there's some things we want to work on. So I'd be happy to talk about that too.
And I know
so.
you want to talk about nuclear power
Yeah,
too.
yeah, and that's
So
part of
we
that
could
whole thing.
have him for every meeting. But thank you.
Yeah, I
And,
apologize for the length of it. So
Very
What
interesting.
about that facility on North Baltimore? Is that working the way it's supposed to?
yes, it is. It's doing well. So the pond that's there, we've had to change the way we operate a little bit. We used to fill it up in the fall, and so right now you'll see it's down. But when we did that, what was happening was there was 3 mama ducks that just made my life miserable. There was 30 little babies that showed up. What we didn't realize is that the ducks and geese come in there and they bring in some biosolids, I'll say that politely, and because we're putting excess nitrogen in there, because we use that high nitrate to irrigate with, so we're working with the owner there, and ultimately what was happening was the algae would grow, the nitrogen went away, which is the same mechanism that the Platte River have, but we ended up with some algae in there, and then we ended up with an odor problem. So what we've done is instead of filling it up in the wintertime, we take it down, it freezes, the algae dies off, and then we add it in the spring. And then by doing that, then we're matching the load that we have with the irrigation that's in there. So it's working. Knowing that, we might have changed a little bit of how we did it, but nobody had really done it before. But we're still using it. It's looking good. So I'm really happy with it.
And the mama duck?
Huh?
And the mama duck?
Well, I mean, they're happy. They seem to be happy.
They're still there?
I did not know, growing up on a farm, I did not know that ducks will babysit other ducklings. I thought they kind of did. These 3 mama ducks were out there, and in that pond, they were happy. There's a fence, the coyotes couldn't get to them, ducks couldn't get to them. But 2 of them would be gone, and 1 mama duck would have those 30 little babies out there, and she took care of them. I was just the cutest thing, and I didn't realize that they would do that. But they worked together because the mamas would go off. We had planted wheat around there. That's what really drove it. So they loved all that wheat that was on the ground that matured. And so, it was kind of our fault, but we learned something out of it. So I'm not afraid to tell people about my failures that are out there. But we've adapted, got it, so it's working.
Thank you.
Yes. And I certainly stick around if you have any other questions you might want to talk about. Good question on the how do we deal with that? Yeah, that's.
Are they still doing